Imagine a garage so massive, so jaw-dropping, so absolutely packed with automotive royalty that just walking through it would make any car enthusiast weak in the knees. We're talking military-grade machines sitting next to six-figure European hypercars, vintage American muscle parked alongside custom-built, one-of-a-kind monsters that no amount of money can simply buy off a showroom floor. This is not just a car collection. This is the physical manifestation of the American dream on four wheels, built by a man who came from absolutely nothing and turned himself into one of the most recognizable human beings who has ever walked this earth. Hi, my name is Johnny, and this is American Muscle. The 1970 Mercedes-Benz Unimog 404. Now, most people start their car collections with something sensible. A sports car, maybe a classic muscle car, something with leather seats and a nice stereo. Arnold Schwarzenegger started his with a military truck. Because of course he did. The Unimog 404 is not a car in the traditional sense of the word. It is a beast. A full-sized, high-clearance, go absolutely anywhere military utility vehicle that was originally built for the German armed forces. And Arnold didn't just stumble across this thing at a used car lot. He sought it out specifically because it matched his personality perfectly. Unstoppable, unconventional, and completely unbothered by whatever terrain is in front of it. Arnold purchased this Unimog sometime in the early 1990s. Right around the same period, his Hollywood career was reaching its absolute peak. And if you think about it, the timing makes perfect sense. Here is a man who had just spent years playing indestructible characters on screen. The Terminator, Predator, Commando. And off-screen, he wanted to drive something that felt equally indestructible. The Unimog 404 was powered by a 2.2-liter inline six-cylinder engine. And while the horsepower figures were never going to set any track records, the torque output and the sheer mechanical toughness of this vehicle meant it could climb a near vertical incline without breaking a sweat. Arnold had his Unimog extensively customized, converting it from a purely utilitarian military workhorse into something that could actually be used as a daily driver. Well, a daily driver if your daily commute involves crossing a riverbed or climbing a small mountain. The conversion work alone reportedly cost a significant sum, and today the vehicle is considered a collector's piece in its own right. Current examples of restored Unimog 404s fetch anywhere between $30,000 and $80,000 at auction, though Arnold's heavily customized version would command considerably more. This is the car that told the world everything it needed to know about what kind of collector Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to be. The Bentley Continental GT. Now we shift gears, literally and figuratively, from military hardware to British luxury, because Arnold Schwarzenegger is a man of extraordinary range. The Bentley Continental GT is one of those rare automobiles that manages to be genuinely thrilling to drive while simultaneously making everyone around it feel slightly underdressed. And that is precisely the kind of car Arnold gravitates toward. The Continental GT that sits in Arnold's collection is finished in a deep, commanding exterior color and is powered by Bentley's legendary 6-liter W12 twin-turbocharged engine, producing 560 horsepower and 820 newton-meters of torque. Now those numbers might not sound apocalyptic compared to some of the other machines we are going to discuss today, but the Continental GT is not about apocalyptic numbers. It is about the way it delivers those numbers, with an almost supernatural smoothness that makes crossing a continent feel like floating on a very expensive cloud. For a man who spent decades in the public eye, as a bodybuilder, as a Hollywood action star, as the governor of the great state of California, the Continental GT represents a certain kind of arrival. Not the loud, look-at-me arrival of a bright red Ferrari, but the quiet, I have absolutely nothing to prove arrival of someone who genuinely does not need your validation. The Continental GT accelerates from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 4.5 seconds and carries a top speed of 198 miles per hour. At an original MSRP of around $200,000, it is by no means the most expensive car in Arnold's garage, but it is arguably one of the most elegant. Jeremy Clarkson himself would be proud. The Porsche 911 Turbo. Alright, I have to be honest with you here for a second. When I was putting this list together, part of me did not want to include the Porsche 911 Turbo. Not because it isn't a sensational car, It absolutely is. But because at this point in automotive history, the 911 Turbo is almost too obvious a choice. It is the car that every serious collector owns. It is the automotive equivalent of owning a Rolex Submariner. But then I remembered something that Rowan Atkinson once said, that he has a problem with Porsches, that he could somehow live without one. Arnold Schwarzenegger clearly has no such problem. The Porsche 911. Turbo in Arnold's collection is a later generation model finished in classic silver, because if you are going to own the most iconic German sports car ever built, you might as well own it in its most iconic color. The 911 Turbo is powered by a 3.8-liter twin-turbocharged flat-six engine producing 520 horsepower and 660 Newton-meters of torque. It rockets from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 2.9 seconds and carries a top speed of 198 miles per hour. What makes Arnold's 911 particularly interesting is the personal context around it. This is a man who was born in Thal, Austria, a small village just outside of Graz, and who grew up idolizing American strength and prosperity from across the Atlantic Ocean. Owning a Porsche 911 Turbo for Arnold is not just about performance. It is a connection to the country of his birth, a nod to the engineering culture that shaped him before America got hold of him and turned him into the Terminator. The 911 Turbo currently carries a price tag of around $214,000 for a new model, and well-maintained examples from the generation Arnold owns have been known to appreciate significantly at auction. The Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon G63 AMG. If you have ever seen a photograph of Arnold Schwarzenegger getting in or out of a car, there is an overwhelming probability that car is a Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. This is not a coincidence. Arnold Schwarzenegger's relationship with the G-Wagon is one of the most well-documented celebrity and automobile partnerships in modern automotive history, and it goes back much further than most people realize. Before the G-Wagon became the status symbol of choice for every Hollywood celebrity, professional athlete, and Instagram influencer on the planet, Arnold was driving one through the hills of Los Angeles at a time when most Americans had never even heard of it. He was introduced to the G-Wagon through his connections to the Mercedes-Benz factory in Graz, Austria, the very same city near where he grew up, where the G-Wagon has been hand-assembled since its introduction in 1979. For Arnold, this vehicle carries a deeply personal significance that goes far beyond horsepower figures and interior trim options. His current G-Wagon is the AMG G63 variant, which takes the already formidable G-Wagon platform and turns everything up to levels that most people would consider medically irresponsible. The 4-liter twin-turbocharged V8 engine produces 577 horsepower and 850 Newton-meters of torque. It goes from 0 to 60 in the 4.5 seconds, which for a vehicle that weighs over 5,000 pounds and has the aerodynamic profile of a garden shed is frankly borderline miraculous. Arnold reportedly owns multiple G-Wagons in different configurations, and at an MSRP of around $160,000 per unit, his G-Wagon fleet alone represents a considerable automotive investment. But some things in life are not about investment. Some things are just about love. The custom Hummer H1. And now we arrive at arguably the most historically significant vehicle in Arnold Schwarzenegger's collection. Not necessarily the most valuable, not the fastest or the most technically sophisticated, but without question, the one that changed the relationship between military hardware and civilian culture forever. Ladies and gentlemen, the Hummer H1. Here is a story most people do not know. In 1989, Arnold Schwarzenegger was on location in Oregon, watching a convoy of military high-mobility, multi-purpose wheeled vehicles, what the military calls Humvees, rolling down the highway. And something clicked. He pulled over. He watched them go by. And then he did what Arnold Schwarzenegger does. He decided he absolutely had to have one. The problem was, at that time, the Humvee was strictly military hardware. It was not available to civilians. Period. Full stop. End of conversation. But Arnold Schwarzenegger is not a man who accepts the end of a conversation. He contacted AM General, the manufacturer of the Humvee, and spent the next 2 years personally lobbying the company to produce a civilian version. And in 1992, AM General launched the civilian Hummer H1, a vehicle that would go on to spawn an entire cultural movement, an automotive subgenre, and eventually a full General Motors brand. Arnold Schwarzenegger was the first civilian in the United States to take delivery of an H1, and he immediately ordered 5 of them. 5. Because one Hummer was apparently not enough for the Terminator. His custom H1 has been modified extensively over the years, including a conversion to run on hydrogen fuel. Because when you have been the governor of California and you care deeply about environmental issues, you find ways to keep driving your beloved Hummer without the associated guilt. The original civilian H1 carried a price tag of around $150,000, but Arnold's custom hydrogen-converted example would be worth considerably more to the right collector today. The 1977 Pontiac Trans Am. Now, we slow down for a moment and pay proper respect to something beautiful, something deeply, unapologetically, red-bloodedly American. The 1977 Pontiac Trans Am is one of the greatest muscle cars ever produced on American soil, and its presence in Arnold's collection tells you something important about the man's relationship with this country. Arnold Schwarzenegger arrived in the United States in 1968 with barely a word of English and an almost incomprehensible ambition. And the cars that greeted him, the muscle cars of late 1960s and early 1970s America, left a permanent impression on a young man from a small Austrian village. The Pontiac Trans Am, with its screaming chicken hood decal, its aggressive body lines, and its thunderous V8 soundtrack, represented everything that America meant to a kid who had grown up dreaming of it from thousands of miles away. Arnold's 1977 Trans Am is finished in the classic black and gold color scheme, the same scheme that made the Bandit's Trans Am in Smokey and the Bandit one of the most recognizable movie cars in Hollywood history, a film that came out the very same year this car rolled off the assembly line. The TA was powered by a 6.6-liter V8 engine producing 200 horsepower and the kind of exhaust note that makes grown men emotional. Well-preserved examples of the 1977 Trans Am currently fetch between $35,000 and $65,000 at auction, with exceptional examples breaking significantly higher. For Arnold, this car is not an investment. It is a love letter to the country that made him. The Mercedes-Benz S-Class Pullman. There is a difference between being rich and being Arnold Schwarzenegger, rich. And nowhere is that distinction more clearly illustrated than with the Mercedes-Benz S-Class Pullman that occupies one of the premium spots in his collection. A regular S-Class is already one of the most luxurious production automobiles on the planet. The Pullman takes that foundation and extends it, literally, into something that operates in an entirely different stratosphere. The S-Class Pullman is the longest, most exclusive, and most expensive production Mercedes-Benz money can buy. We are talking about a vehicle that stretches to over 6 meters in length, features a dedicated rear passenger compartment that would not look out of place in a 5-star hotel suite, and carries a base price that starts at around $500,000 for the standard variant. Arnold's Pullman is the kind of vehicle that heads of state and royalty use for official transport, and the fact that it sits in the garage of a former bodybuilder from rural Austria is one of the most perfectly American stories ever told. The Pullman is powered by a 6-liter V, 12-bi-turbo engine producing 530 horsepower and 830 newton-meters of torque. It is not a sports car. It is not trying to be. The Pullman exists to transport its occupants from one important place to another important place with a level of refinement and insulation from the outside world that borders on the sensory. For a man who spent decades being one of the most recognizable and most approached human beings on the planet, sometimes you just need a car that makes the outside world go very, very quiet. The Bugatti Veyron. We are entering rarefied air now. The kind of air that smells faintly of carbon fiber and extraordinary wealth. The Bugatti Veyron is one of the most significant automobiles produced in the 21st century. A machine that redefined what was considered physically possible from a road car when it was first unveiled, and a machine that still stops traffic in the year 2026 as comprehensively as it did on the day it launched. Arnold's Bugatti Veyron is finished in a distinctive two-tone exterior and is powered by the Veyron's legendary 8-liter W16 quad turbocharged engine producing 1,001 horsepower. 1,001 horsepower in a road car. I want you to sit with that number for a moment. The Veyron accelerates from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 2.5 seconds and carries a top speed of 253 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest production road cars ever built at the time of its manufacture. The original MSRP for the Veyron sat at around $1,700,000, though exceptional examples have fetched well above $2 million at auction in recent years. What is fascinating about Arnold's Veyron is what it represents in the context of his broader collection. Everything else in his garage, the Unimog, the Hummer, the Trans Am, speaks to a man who values character, history, and personal significance above pure monetary value. The Veyron is the one concession to pure, unadulterated, no-excuses automotive excess. It is the car that exists simply because it is the greatest. And if you are Arnold Schwarzenegger, sometimes greatest is exactly what you are looking for. The converted military tank. I told you he owned a tank. I told you he drives it. And I need you to understand that I am not being metaphorical or using tank as a colorful description for a large SUV. Arnold Schwarzenegger owns an actual, genuine, former military tank. Specifically, he owns an M47 Patton tank, a full-size, track-driven, steel-hulled battle tank that served in the United States Army during the 1950s and was subsequently used by several NATO allied forces throughout the Cold War era. Arnold purchased this tank sometime in the 1990s and, in a move that surprises absolutely nobody who knows anything about him, he uses it. He has been photographed driving it through the streets of Los Angeles. He has used it for charity events, most famously for his annual charity initiative, where lucky auction winners got to ride in the tank with Arnold and watch him crush things. Cars, a taxi cab, a limousine, even a piano. Because when you own a tank and you are Arnold Schwarzenegger, you absolutely crush things with it. This is non-negotiable. The M47 Patton weighs approximately 46 tons, is powered by a Continental AV12 810 horsepower air-cooled gasoline engine, and carries a top speed of approximately 30 miles per hour on road surfaces. Now, I know what you were thinking. 30 miles per hour does not sound very impressive. And you are correct. But it sounds considerably more impressive when you remember it is coming from a 46-ton tank. Fully restored and operational, M47 Patton tanks have been known to sell for between $300,000 and $600,000 at military vehicle specialist auctions, making Arnold's tank one of the most unusual and one of the most genuinely extraordinary automotive assets of any celebrity collector on the planet. The 1977 Lincoln Continental Custom. And here we are, the #1 spot, the reveal I promised you at the beginning of this video. And I need you to forget everything you think you know about what the most expensive or most impressive car in a celebrity collection should look like. Because the most important car in Arnold Schwarzenegger's collection is not the most expensive one. It is not the fastest one. It is not the one with the most horsepower or the most exclusive production number or the most dramatic auction history. The most important car in Arnold Schwarzenegger's collection is a 1977 Lincoln Continental, a custom, heavily modified example of one of America's most iconic full-size luxury automobiles. And the reason it sits at the top of this list is the story behind it. Because this car is not just a car to Arnold. This car is a monument. When Arnold Schwarzenegger first came to America as a young man with nothing but ambition and an impossible physique, the Lincoln Continental was the car that represented success to him. It was the car he saw in movies, in magazines, in the hands of the people he wanted to become. It was in the mind of a young Austrian bodybuilder with dreams bigger than his bank account, the car that said, "You had made it in America." And so, when Arnold did make it, when the bodybuilding titles were won and the movie roles were secured and the bank account became the kind of bank account that most people cannot actually visualize, one of the first things he did was acquire a Lincoln Continental and have it customized to his exact personal specifications. The customization work done on Arnold's Continental is extensive and deeply personal. The exterior has been modified with custom bodywork, The interior has been completely refitted with bespoke materials, and the drivetrain has been upgraded to reflect the kind of performance standards that a man who owns a Bugatti and a tank naturally expects from his vehicles. The base Lincoln Continental of this era was powered by a 7.5-liter V8 engine, and Arnold's custom version retains and enhances that American V8 soundtrack that first captured his imagination all those years ago in Austria. There is no auction record for this car, there is no MSRP to reference, there is no comparable sale at Sotheby's or Silverstone or RM auctions that can tell us what this specific vehicle is worth in dollar terms, because the truth is, it is not for sale. It has never been for sale. In a collection that includes a Bugatti Veyron, a military tank, and a vehicle that single-handedly created the civilian Hummer market, this Lincoln Continental, this personal, deeply meaningful, thoroughly American automobile, is the one that Arnold will never let go. And that, more than any horsepower figure or auction record or MSRP, is what makes it the most valuable car in his entire collection. And that is Arnold Schwarzenegger's multi-million-dollar car collection, from a German military truck to a Bugatti hypercar, from a 1977 American muscle icon to an actual functioning tank. This is a collection that tells the story of one of the most extraordinary lives ever lived, a story of ambition, of reinvention, of a love affair with America that expressed itself, among other ways, in the most spectacular automotive terms imaginable. I am Johnny, this is American Muscle, and if this video blew your mind half as much as it blew mine putting it together, hit that subscribe button, because we have got so much more where this came from. Next week we are going inside another legendary garage that will absolutely destroy your expectations. You do not want to miss it.